You may begin the presentation, Benedict.
Good evening and welcome to the Redwood Library in Athenæum in Newport, Rhode Island. I'm Benedict Lecca, the Executive Director, and I'm very pleased that you'll be joining us this evening for a very special presentation about an extraordinary chapter in aviation history, that is the formation and the heroic missions of the Lafayette Escadrille. The team of crack young Americans who joined a fledgling French Air Force in the First World War. Before we meet our co-writers and directors, just a little technical note. If you would like to ask questions, feel free to click the chat feature found at the center of the bottom bar, and a window will appear at the right of your screen. Simply type your question at any time during the lecture, and it will be included in the Q&A session at the conclusion of the show. Also, I would remind that if you would like a replay of the lecture at any time, you can visit our website, and you will be directed to the Redwood's YouTube channel where it will be playing. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our two friends and the co-writers and directors of the movie. You may recall that at least Paul Glenshaw was one of the two co-curators with Dan Henderson of the exhibition that we put on at the Redwood Library in 2015, funded by the Durham L Foundation. And that was really the beginning of our involvement with this material and this story. Paul Glenshaw is co-director, writer, and producer of the documentary, The Lafayette Escadrille, which we'll be talking about tonight. During the 2020 pandemic, he and Darroch Greer co-created the Seven Tones Project, pairing musicians and filmmakers to create short films based on the music of Duke Ellington. He's a drawing instructor and history lecturer for the Smithsonian Associates and contributing author to the Smithsonian's Air and Space magazine, and also the Folger Shakespeare Library and Beyond blog. He lives in Silver Spring, Maryland, and is a graduate of Washington University in St. Louis. Darroch Greer is an award-winning documentary filmmaker, writer, historical researcher, and co-writer and co-director of the Lafayette Escadrille. Darroch has researched, written, and directed documentaries on Native America, Civil War, Western expansion, jazz and pop, American cinema for PBS, the History Channel, Discovery Channel, Turner Classic Movies, among others. For 5 years, Darroch served as the researcher on the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. So welcome everyone, and I now pass it on over to Paul and Darroch. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Benedict. I'll begin. Bear with me one quick second, everyone, while I share my screen. It is cocktail hour, and so I'll throw it to Darroch right now, and if you have something to enjoy a cocktail, please feel free to join us. Take it away, Darroch.
Well, here we are in Harry's New York bar in Paris, France, and we're going to show you how to make the Lafayette cocktail. Paul and I were here with our cinematographer, Mathieu Maza, at Harry's at 5 Rue d'Onu in Paris. And we walked in and asked the bartender, Jerry, if he could make us the French 75. And he said, yes, I'd be happy to do that. And I said, it's very simple. It's half champagne, half cognac. And he said, no, I can't do that. I said, no, it's very simple. Half champagne, half cognac. He said, I'm sorry, that's not the cocktail, and I can't make that in his very French way. And I said, well, it's right here. It's right here in Ted Parsons' book. And on page 101, William Thaw should have had at least one more medal. With Lufberry, he was the inventor and chief exponent of that very dynamic concoction known as the Lafayette cocktail. Jerry said, oh yeah, I can make that. Half champagne, half cognac. It was composed of equal parts of brandy and champagne. This soothing mixture with the kick of a mule brought William Thaw down and many another good man where the Boche failed. So without further ado, I will grab my bottle of champagne and hopefully you all can join in here. By the way, I recommend not doing half cognac. It really does have the kick of a mule, and just a little floater of cognac seems to do it. Paul and I have done this several times, and the first one, I think I had 3 of these things, and it was a very merry gathering.
I guess the mix of the cocktail depends on the mix of the day.
And a little bit of Martell VSOP. Throw the prop. And we're ready for takeoff. To the Lafayette Escadrille and to the Redwood Library, santé.
Cheers. Skål.
Cheers, everyone. Thank you, Derek.
You're welcome.
So we've got a presentation to take you through to talk about the making of our feature-length documentary film, The Lafayette Escadrille. The film, we are very proud to say, is finished. We completed it in January of this year. As we all know, the pandemic has shut a lot of things down, so the film has not yet been released. We'll talk a little bit more about that later, but the film is finished. It was 4 years in the making. So before we jump into the making of, seeing as this is, gosh, I think this is my 3rd presentation for Redwood and the exhibit that Dan Patterson and I did back in 2015. We've got a nice history with you guys. We're so grateful for the opportunity to be able to come back and share this story with you and update you on where we are. But it made sense to us to talk a little bit about the Lafayette Escadrille and Newport, because there are so many interesting connections between some of the members of the squadron and your lovely city. Just to remind us, this was 5 years ago at the opening of the exhibit that Dan and I did. There's Guillaume and Lisette and Prince and David McCullough, and truly a wonderful experience that really helped us get our legs under us on telling this story. We're going to start with William Thaw, who's one of the co-founders with Norman Prince of the Lafayette Escadrille. The photograph of him on the left is when he was a freshman at Yale, and the photograph on the right is at the conclusion of World War I, where he's a 25-year-old lieutenant colonel. But the Thaw family, of course, had a house there in Newport, beachbound. There's a picture of Thaw on the far left and his family in 1912. William Thaw spent a lot of time in Newport. He learned to fly Curtiss flying boats in Hammondsport, New York. That's a picture of him on the right, a little close up there. And he brought his airplane to Newport and flew quite a lot there. And here's a notice from Aeronautics Magazine of October 1913 talking about William Thaw and his flying partner flying from Newport to New Haven. And Thaw became quite well known for some of his escapades. He flew under several bridges in New York City, among other adventures. On the left is a newspaper clipping, and on the right is a close-up of that clipping. And this talks about the Newport Art Association. I believe this was 1913, exhibiting the works of Miss Laura Chandler, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Winthrop Chandler. And one of the drawings he had on display there was of Victor Chapman, one of the original squadron members of the Lafayette Escadrille. And Miss Chandler, I believe, was the niece of Elizabeth Chandler, who we see in the John Singer Sargent painting on the right, and on the far left on the photograph that was taken in Paris with her husband standing beside her, John J. Chapman, and her stepson standing there, Victor Chapman. We haven't quite yet found something that tells us that Victor was in Newport. I would be surprised if he wasn't. And seeing as you all know your history of Newport so well, any light you can shine on this and suggest things for it, we'd be happy to hear them.
as well as finding the drawing of Victor Chapman.
Absolutely, absolutely. If we could find that drawing, it'd be wonderful. But of course, now we come to the Prince family, and here's a small newspaper clipping, I believe, from 1914, talking about the dedication of a garden at the estate of Commodore Arthur Curtis James, and looks like the Prince family was there in force to participate. But we have this great newspaper, the New York Sun, talking about the goings-on at Newport and Long Branch, and we have this picture of Norman Prince is back anyway, but it's Norman Prince dancing, and this is probably about 3 weeks before World War I began. But what we really love in the story of Norman and Newport, at least for the purposes of telling the Escadrille story, is the relationship he had with his aunt, Miss Mabel Norman. This is a letter that was found in the Newport Historical Society, written by Norman during the war to her. And you can see he just put her New York City address or Newport, Rhode Island. And the letter begins with his talking about the death of his grandmother and receiving that news. But a little further on in the letter, he refers to one of the other pilots. And they're both in this picture. There's Norman just to the left of the center, and to the right of the center is a pilot who is one of the original members of the Lafayette Escadrille named Bert Hall. Hey, Dan, would it be okay if you muted yourself just for a moment until you're ready to go? Thanks. So Bert, if I'll spoiler alert. Bert Hall was asked to leave the Lafayette Escadrille because he cheated too many of them at cards, and he was a liar, and you know, he was not your Class A citizen. And we'd always heard these stories about it, but we'd never seen a smoking gun piece of evidence. Well, this letter is it. Midway through the right-hand page, you'll see Norman say, one of them, Hall, asked me to identify him at the bank as being Hall so he could cash a check. And Norman says, very stupidly, I did. Turns out Bert passed what must have been a long series of bad checks, and Norman had to cover it. And on the last page of the letter, he says, I am doing my utmost to compel Hall to make good, and if he doesn't, I shall try to see to it that he lands in jail after the war. It's actually turned out to be pretty prophetic words, because a long time later, it took several years, quite a couple of decades, but Bert Hall finally did wind up in jail.
He wound up in jail for running guns to Chiang Kai-shek's Chinese over in China. He was a very interesting character and a pretty good pilot, and he wrote 2 autobiographies, one ghost-written by the folklorist John Jacob Niles. But his books are very, very entertaining. And just one quick sentence, he apparently did not hold anything against Norman Prince, because he says in chapter 5, our organization, which was first known as the American Escadrille, was due to Norman Prince and to no one else, in my opinion. Bert Hall also wound up in Hollywood in 1919 and made a movie called Romance of the Air, starring himself about himself, being a pilot of the Lafayette Escadrille. It's a terrible movie, but there we are.
So let's get on to a good movie, our movie. Derek, over to you.
So here we are. This is actually in the early summer of 1917 along the Chemin des Dames. Paul and I are with our cinematographer, the French-American Mathieu Maza, and this is a place where some very serious battles were fought that several members of the Lafayette Escadrille, when they were fighting with the French Foreign Legion, were involved in. This is our very first day of shooting. This was 4 years ago. This was in April of 1916. 2016, thank you. 100 years later, to the day of the formation of the Lafayette Escadrille. And we're here for the dedication of the memorial that was built to the Lafayette Escadrille and the Lafayette Flying Corps, which are the other American pilots that flew for other American squadrons. And this is midway between Paris and Versailles, and it is a half-scale replica of the Arc de Triomphe. And our co-producer, Dan Patterson, is with us, and I send it over to you, Dan.
Well, this was the first time the three of us actually got together to work on this project. We talked on the phone, and we all arrived in Paris. And April 20th, 2016 was the 100th anniversary of the formation of the squadron, and was the day they rededicated this memorial, which is now being managed by the American Battle Monuments Commission, and it is in spectacular condition. And what was cool about it is Guillaume is in the photograph, and Regis, and many of these family members of the original pilots had never met before. And we gathered them together for a class pictures, if you will. And the comments as we gathered with these folks, and that they had never met before, and the common experiences their ancestors had was remarkable. And we were lucky to be there and to be recording this for this film. This was the opening shot of our project, and the three of us have the best memories of this experience. And we've made great friends, including Guillaume and his family, and the Lufberry family, and the James Norman Hall family, and everybody else. It was a great way to begin this project, and we feel very fortunate to have been a part of it.
Absolutely.
Here are examples of four of the people we interviewed. You'll recognize Guillaume in the upper left, and he is in front of his Carbon Cub, which, if I'm not mistaken, Guillaume, you built, indeed?
I did.
To Guillaume's right is Carolyn Bridgman Reese, and she is the daughter of Ray Bridgman, excuse me. Who was a pacifist who decided he still had to fight and flew for the Lafayette Escadrille, and he had 4 victories to his record. In the lower left is Alexandra
Truitt.
Thank you, Truitt. She is the great-grandniece of James McConnell, and she's the daughter of a prominent artist, and we met her in New York and interviewed her. And in the lower right-hand corner is Lieutenant Colonel Nicholas Rutgers, and he is a 4th-generation combat pilot. His great-grandfather was James Norman Hall, who flew in World War I, of course. His grandfather flew in World War II, and his father flew in Vietnam. And Nick is in our film, and he's been very supportive of it. It's really been great to spend time with him. This is in France, and it was very important for us to go to the locations where our pilots, our characters, trained and flew and fought and died. And in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see Paul, and he is next to French General Daniel Bastien, and we're in the town of Corcieux, which is the hospital where Norman Prince was taken and where he passed away in the hospital from his injuries. Right below him is Colonel Jean-Pierre Jean-Patrice Lesaint, excuse me. He is the commander of the air base at Loxay-les-Bains, and this is the air base started right at the beginning of World War I, and it's the first base in which the Lafayette Escadrille served. And Jean-Patrice was very fluent in the history of the Lafayette Escadrille, as well as where the best place to get a bagel in Silver Spring, Maryland, Paul's hometown. We had dinner together, and Jean-Patrice and his family had spent 8 years working at the Pentagon, so he knew the DC area very well. In the upper right-hand corner, I am interviewing Andre and Michelle Spetz, and they are local amateur historians with a special interest in Kiffin Rockwell because he crashed and died about 100 yards over their left shoulder. And they've written a children's book about him, and they put together an annual memorial gathering, which we'll see a little later, for Kiffin Rockwell. And below him is Jean-Marc Simon. Spoke very little English. We spoke very little French, but Jean-Marc lives in Ham, H-A-M, France, where they served for a long time. And 4 members of the Lafayette Escadrille lost their lives. And he is standing in front of the airfield where they flew from. And here is Paul, down and dirty, interviewing two-star Brigadier General Yvon Goutte. And Yvon was also the president of the Lafayette Association, which is a group of French pilots, veterans of the Escadrille Lafayette, which is a French squadron that still flies with the American Indian insignia of the Lafayette Escadrille on their planes.
I'll take it over for a few minutes and just talk briefly about the locations that we went to. As Derek said, it's really important for us to go to the places where the story happened. It didn't happen in the United States. It happened in France. And especially for our American audiences, we felt it critical that France itself become a character in the film and give them a real sense of place, as it is now, as it was then. And we had great help. Derek mentioned General Bastien, and here he is, standing with us, and we are standing on the spot that he worked out. He's a former four-star general, defense attaché to the United States, a very senior guy, but he also used to be a reconnaissance pilot, and he loves looking at maps, and he's very good at it. And looking at old maps of Corsieux and old electrical grid maps, because Norman Prince hit some electrical wires, which is what caused his crash, Danielle was able to pinpoint and using photographs of the actual crash, Danielle was actually able to work out where the plane hit the ground, and that's where we're standing. So when the story of Norman Prince's crash is told, it's told at the place where it actually happened. It happens to be the parking lot of the President Brand cheese factory, but that's where it happened. Here's a very simplified production map. This shows the various places that we filmed in France in 2016 and 2017, basically stretching from one side of the Western Front to the other, following where the unit actually flew. We didn't go all the way to the English Channel, but the Lafayette Escadrille did. We were also very grateful to the German reconnaissance pilots of the First World War, and to Google Earth, because we wanted to find the actual airfields where they flew from. And this is a great example. This is the little village of Bayonne, which is right near Bar-le-Duc, and this is about 30 kilometers from Verdun. So this is the airfield that we're looking for, the airfield where they flew when they were flying over Verdun, which was their first real air combat experience. Fortunately, the Germans shot a picture of their airfield in 1916. And I was able to marry up the reconnaissance photograph with using the roads. If you look at the roads, you'll see that the roads still line up perfectly. And buildings that are still extant are in the satellite photograph and in the black and white photograph. So we were able to see that on the edge of a little, I'll put my cursor if you can see that. I don't know if you can. Oops, excuse me. That this little corner of the field is what's left of the Lafayette Escadrille's flying field. So when, excuse me, come on, Tim. There we go. So when we shot the drone across the field to get a takeoff shot of what it must have looked like for them flying off to battle in Verdun, we were flying out of the same field. They were pointed the same direction as the battlefield. Just down the hill from where that was shot, working with some local historians there, we were able to discover the villa that they lived in. At the very beginning of the unit's existence, they lived in very nice homes before they had to go live in the mud in the Somme and other places. But at the beginning, they were quartered very nicely, and this is that house. Around the corner from that house is this alleyway. And again, Danielle Bastien figured this one out. Because we'd always wanted to know where this photograph was taken. And the buildings are all still there. The foliage has changed. There wasn't a highway there in 1916, but Norman Prince was there in 1916, and Charles Nungesser in the center, and Didier Masson on the right. And so to be able to stand right where that happened and then bring our viewers from the present into the past in the same place is a very effective way of engaging people in participating in the story. This is a stone marker to Kiffin Rockwell in a little park that's named for him in the town of Rodorin, where Derek mentioned before. We were looking at Andre and Michelle Spetz. And he mentioned their annual ceremony that they have to commemorate Kiffin's loss. And this is it. And I want to emphasize that this photograph and the filming we did there, what they were doing was not put on for the cameras. We showed up. They were doing this anyway. And it was a really remarkable event where they honor the United States and France and the veterans who served those two countries in this conflict and in other conflicts. You see a young person standing there holding a flute in the background with a blue shirt and blue jeans. That's a high school band from Michigan who comes every year while they're on tour throughout France. And it was really very moving just to see what's done just for the sake of doing it, just for the sake of that memory. Because those memories are very strong in France. This is one of the pictures that really, I think, illustrates the glamour, the real glamour of documentary filmmaking. This is where it all happens. This is why you do it, so that you can hold an umbrella, so that the camera doesn't get wet in the pouring rain at Verdun, but you do. Because the camera is the most important thing. But no, to be serious, Verdun, those of you who have been there, it's an incredibly moving place to go. And we were filming, in this particular case, the cemetery in front of the ossuary, which holds the remains of many thousands of unidentified soldiers.
It was quite something to be in Verdun, where the weather was so bad, dark clouds overhead. And we had just been in Paris 2 days ago, where it had been 94 degrees. And so it was quite something to be down in the trenches and amongst the graveyards in this weather.
It really was. This on the left is the original grave of Jim McConnell. He was buried where he fell beside a little road near the village of Flavy-la-Martelle. And again, we just showed up, and his remains have been removed to, I'll play that again for you so you can see it. His remains have been removed to the Lafayette Escadrille Memorial, but a stone marker is placed where his original grave was. And that hedge and the flowers and everything were manicured and taken care of. And again, somebody's just doing that just to make sure that that memory is properly cared for. This burst of color comes from my, this was really tough. I really had to take one for the team here and go to Tahiti to interview Nancy Hall Rutgers, who's the daughter of James Norman Hall. And some of you may recognize James Norman Hall's name. He was, after the war, he and Charles Nordhoff moved to the South Pacific, moved to Tahiti. They wrote adventure books, including the Mutiny on the Bounty trilogy. And so Nancy grew up in Tahiti and divides her time between there and the United States. And the family insisted that she be interviewed there, that we go to see how far away from everything James Norman Hall went in order really to retain his sanity after the war. This is his study, which is in his home, which is now a museum. And on the right, you see his grave. And his epitaph is the first stanza of a poem that he wrote when he was about 9 years old. Now we're going to talk about the primary collections that we used, and one of the most important ones that came to us, and we're going to hand this one over to Benedict, because he got it going.
Thank you, Paul. I don't want to take too much time of this fascinating story. One of the things that I do routinely is scour eBay in France, ebay.fr, which is radically different, of course, from the ebay.com, which is the American version. So before, during, and after the exhibition that we mounted 5 years ago, I would periodically type in Lafayette and Escadrille. And after the exhibition, sure enough, bingo, someone in France was selling the private papers of Norman Prince. So it was his, and Guillaume can tell us more about the exact contents. I never saw the contents. I just saw a few photos, and it was, you know, his diary, the pictures, the all that. And so we were very fortunate to, you know, be able to get that, Paul and Derek. And so it was one of those miracle coincidences. And of course, it's ongoing. Not but an hour ago, I just typed in Lafayette Escadrille, and we have here for 290 euros.
I'll take it.
And it's an immediate purchase. It is an invitation to the inauguration in Mountain La Coquette of the monument.
Wow.
It does feature a photograph that is autographed by every surviving member as of 1928. So perhaps that's something you're interested in. 290 euros. I might email him and say, you know, 200, not a penny more. Anyways, so there it is. That was my humble role in this, and I was thrilled to find it, and I'm glad that you were able to use it. So there it is.
Okay, we'll send it over to Guillaume, because these are actually the photographs that Guillaume started texting me as he opened it up. Tell us what that was like.
I mean, the family, our family owes a huge debt of gratitude to you, Benedict, for searching, because I think you sent it to my mom, who's I think in the audience, Lisette Prince, and then who sent it to me. And then I remember looking at the eBay listing, and it was in maybe 5-10 kilometers from Geneva, Switzerland, which is where my grandfather, Freddie Jr.'s only son, his second wife, had passed away maybe, I don't know, 2-3 years earlier, and all her estate belongings had been kind of collected up and put in a storage container. But I thought it struck me that it was only about 5 miles away, and immediately thought, gee, somebody stole this out of the container. So fortunately, Diana, my sister, who I think might be in the audience as well, wave if you're there. But Diana, fortunately lives in Switzerland. So she contacted a friend of the family who graciously offered to escort her to this seller, and Diana, make some faces or something if I'm not.
No, you're right.
But you might have to pick up on the story here. But I think he got pretty mad, didn't he? And I think he wanted some outrageous amount, like 20 or 30,000 euros for this trunk, which he had no idea what was inside the trunk. But I remember when long story short, we fortunately were able to buy the trunk, and it ended up in my mom's living, or in her front vestibule. And I started going through it, and immediately was just struck by the incredible stash of stuff that were in there, and started snapping away these pictures and sending them to Paul and saying, "Oh my God, you can't believe what I just found." I mean, just incredible pictures. And I mean, you can see a picture there of the diary that I think there are several diaries, but and it's actually, I was really struck by my great grandfather who joined the Lafayette Escadrille, I think the day, just by coincidence, or thereabouts, when his brother died. But you can hear him describing, or read him describing, kind of hearing about his brother's mortal injuries and not knowing that he had died yet, but racing to the scene and just thinking, wow, I mean, just seeing all this incredible, pictures and letters back and forth. Norman, some of the stuff that he'd gathered from his brother, all in this trunk.
Guillaume, can we have Diana tell the story about strong-arming the guy for the trunk? Because I tell this story, and I don't know if I have it right, but Diana, can you fill us in?
Diana, are you on mute?
Yeah, I'm on mute. Well, it was a bit scary because it was in a container, about a 20. He was in the middle of nowhere, and he was very angry when I showed up without an appointment. Well, we tried to make an appointment, but he wasn't really answering. And I went with one of Mom's friends, who's a general. I think he's a colonel in the Swiss Army. And when we showed up, he was very, very angry. And he said, "Oh, you typical Americans, you walk all over us." And then when he found out that I was actually Norman Prince's niece, he went, "Oh." And then he was like, "Oh," then he changed his tune. And of course, the Swiss, our friend, the Swiss military man was very good at conflict avoidance. And, he used his hands to back the guy down. And then all of a sudden, he was really excited to meet a relative of Norman Prince. And then I got my mom on a FaceTime call, and then he was like, "Oh my God, you've got, Elizabeth Prince." And he really felt like he was with a bunch of, very famous people. And I kept trying to tell him, we're not famous at all. This stuff only has value for family members, nobody else. I was trying to get his price down. And but he was like, "No, there are people all around the world who want this stuff." And anyway, I had to tell him it really had no value except for us. That was my negotiation, trying to negotiate the price down. But in the end, it was a big warehouse with a lot of junk, and it was very difficult to sort of, there was this trunk full of stuff, but it was very hard to. I think there was additional things that I brought back, like the photo albums were not in the trunk originally. And I kept saying, well, nobody is going to want those photo albums. Those are really for the family. So I was able to negotiate, as much as I could from this guy. But anyway, that was my story.
Well, thank you.
Incredible. Well, Guillaume started sending me these pictures, and my eyes were popping out of my head, because we've been very fortunate up to this point. We'd found 4 other collections in family possessions, unpublished letters, diaries, some photographs, some other things. And then to see this, and to see like that picture on the left, because we're trying to get across in the film that Frederick Henry Prince Sr. was a very big character in his son's lives. And he was a very controlling guy. And how do we get that over? And then this picture appears, and you're like, wow, that says it. That tells the story right there. And then to see the picture of Freddie and Norman on the left and the right, and then to see the pictures of them in their uniforms on the left and on the right. I mean, it was incredibly important for us to have access to this. And Lisette and Guillaume and Diana and Regis, all of you have been so generous and helpful to us. And I came up and I think I spent 4 days at Lisette's place photographing and scanning the entire collection. And we had the entire thing transcribed, because the letters and the diaries are just, we couldn't include all of it. Of course, there was just so much, but it opened our eyes to who they were. For example, the letter on the left, it starts out, this is from Abigail Norman Prince, Norman's mother, writing to him, "Dear Nimmy." Well, that was a really big clue, because all throughout Freddie Prince's diary, he keeps referring to Nim. And so we worked out that was his nickname. And that's the thing, you read about these characters in history, and sometimes it never occurs to you that, well, he was still somebody's little boy. He had a nickname, and it was Nimmy. And this letter is his mother writing during this a memorial service for Victor Chapman, the first of them to be killed, and so worried about her son, and so unsure about what he's doing. And on the right, you see Freddie's diary, and it's what Guillaume referred to, is him writing the story of racing across France to get to what he didn't know, but he quickly found out, his mortally wounded brother, and not getting there in time. And so to have that story told in his words for the first time, and hear the story of the death of Norman Prince from, the guy who knew him best, that's really something. That's what sends this thing home. And because that's something anybody can relate to. The loss of a family member, the loss of somebody so close, even though it's such unusual circumstances for most of us. So anyway, we can't really overstate how important this was to us. And so we thank you all very, very much.
Indeed.
Dan, the thing is, in 2017, 2 collections were found. One through the dramatic story that Diana and Guillaume just told us, and Benedict. But the other one was just, hey, there's a box in my father's storage unit. Why don't we open it? And don't tell us what was inside, because he saw it.
This is the contents of Kiffin Rockwell's pocket the day he was shot down and killed. And Marcel Rockwell, who is a grandniece, I believe, Paul.
Yes.
And she was coming to Ohio for a business project. And I met her at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, and she gave me this valise full of stuff. And I brought this stuff back to my studio, and there was like 300 photographs that needed to be scanned. But there were all these little packages, and this one had a note written on it, the contents of Kiffin Rockwell's pocket the day he was shot down. So I had this in my studio, and I opened this up, and I have to say, there's a great reverence for artifacts like this. And out of this, I unwrapped this craft paper package, and what appeared was the cigarette case that was engraved with his name on it that was wrecked when he was crashed. The watch he was wearing, the handkerchief had blood stains on it. He was carrying a photograph of Victor Chapman in his pocket. And what's wrapped with string there are pieces of his propeller, which are embedded with French soil, which was the whole point of being there. And it was kind of a religious moment to hold this stuff and be able to make an image like this of the cigarettes he would have smoked when he got back to the base that day. And the picture of his friend Victor that was taken just a couple days before Victor was killed. It was a remarkable experience to even be able to hold this stuff. And there were other things also from a previous injury, but this is the main event here. This is what he had in his pocket when he took off the day he was killed. And it was a remarkable experience for me. And to be able to make an image like this of what he would have taken out of his pocket when he landed if he hadn't been killed. So
how did the tobacco taste, Dan?
Well, I don't smoke, but I actually thought of smoking one of those. But I thought Marcel and you guys would have killed me, so I did not.
Or Marcel would have killed you first.
No, absolutely.
Of course, the movie wouldn't work if we didn't have really cool airplanes in it. And this is where, the little boy and all of us comes kind of racing out to play.
The airplanes were a real struggle because these guys flew through 4 years of the war, and planes were evolving. Not only planes they were flying, but the planes they were flying against. So here we have our intrepid cinematographer, Matthew Mazza, filming a Newport 17, and he's in a kind of a plane called a Breezy. I don't know why they call it that, but Andrew King is the pilot right in the front, and we met these two barnstormers who have 7/8 scale Newport 17s, and they're that small so that when they take off the wings, they can load them into a trailer and drive them wherever they want to fly. In the upper left-hand corner is you can't really even call it an aerodrome. It's a garage with a grass strip in front of it in the middle of Pennsylvania, and that's where the guys flew out of. And right nearby is the Great War Association battlefield. And this is a group of reenactors, and they have dozens of acres in which they have dug trenches and shell holes, and we got a lot of great photography of these planes flying over them. In the lower left-hand corner is the Golden Age Air Museum, and they have the only German two-cockpit double-seater plane. This is a Rumpler that's flying in the world. And many of the accounts of these guys, particularly Kiffin Rockwell, the account of his death is against a biplane with a gunner in the back. And so it was very important to get shots with that. So we got up in the air with the breezy with that one as well. And to the right is a photograph that Dan Patterson took of one of the Newport 17s. This is in France. And the picture you saw earlier of Paul interviewing Yvon Gut was during an air show at Saint-Dizier. There were jets flying over constantly. But we met a pilot who flies a replica Newport 28, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner. And the next day he was going to fly over Verdun. So we got into a private plane of, I think we met Eric Kircher through eBay, and he took us up in his plane. It was very difficult shooting through a glass cockpit, but we got some great shots of the Newport 28, which represented the plane that James Norman Hall crashed in his final crash. The lower left-hand corner, we're back at Luxeuil-les-Bains, which is an active airfield, and that is a Mirage jet that is painted in the colors of Georges Guynemer, who was probably the greatest French ace. He disappeared in the sky in 1917, but he flew a Newport and I think then a Spad, both of which he named Old Charles. And so this is painted as a memorial to him. And in the lower right-hand corner is a pilot that Paul had met at the French Embassy a year before in Washington, D.C., Hervé, and he flies with the Patrie de France, and they're an exhibition flying team like the Blue Angels and Thunderbirds. But in the end, we did not have a Newport flying with an Eindecker, with the early German monoplane, and we had to have these for these earlier shots. And out of desperation, I found a group of radio-controlled modelers. These are the Long Island Skyhawks, way out near Southampton, and they fly very large models, nothing smaller than a quarter scale. And you'll see in the middle the yellow and gray quarter scale Eindeckers. And then there's a beautiful plane second in from the right, a 1/3 scale Albatross, all made out of wood. And we got some extraordinary shots of them, and we were able to match the color of the airplanes to real planes we had shot on the ground. So each one of our flying sequences, are about half a dozen, really look like whole cloth. They look like real planes.
Yeah, we're very proud of the fact that in the screenings we've done of the film, some with very astute and eagle-eyed aircraft aficionados, it's now a pleasure for us to say, so could you tell which ones were models? And there were models. So that's a good thing. And we're also very proud of the fact that every airplane you see flying in our film is a flying airplane. We don't have any computer-generated airplanes flying at all. They are all actually in the air.
Indeed.
So we are nearly at the end of our presentation. We'll talk about where we stand right now. Our mission is almost accomplished.
As Paul said, we have a finished plane, a finished film. Dan helped us do our first premiere last Veterans Day at the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force in Dan's hometown of Dayton, Ohio. And there we are, the three producers. Luckily, Raoul Lufberry, Norman Prince, and Kiffin Rockwell all showed up, and we got our picture taken with them. This is Yvon Gut. He flew out from Paris, and David Hanna, who wrote a book about the Americans who served with the Foreign Legion in World War I. And there we are standing with Kiffin Rockwell. And here we are again. To the right is Capitaine Georges Tenot III. He is the grandson of the French commander of the Lafayette Escadrille, and he is a pilot himself. He flies for American Airlines. That looks like Guillaume on the left, but it is his twin brother Regis, and also Nick Rutgers, whom you met earlier, in his full dress uniform at the premiere.
So how cool is it to have these family members joining us, and they're all pilots? That's pretty amazing.
It's pretty special.
Yeah, this is in the theater, and you can see that FedEx had come in as our corporate sponsor and gave us finishing funds. But the film wasn't quite done. We actually needed special effects, tracers, smoke, things like that that had been done very hastily. And also Paul had a great deal to do with editing the soundtrack, which is all classical music, a lot of it French, not all classical music, but music from the era we used to score the whole film. So we got into the festival. We had a month to really tune it back up and had our official premiere the end of January. And then we were ready to go on from there. We got into the Kansas City Film Festival in March, and we were going to show it at the National World War I Museum. But of course, the pandemic got in the way, and we had to do it online. And since then, we're just sort of waiting for things to settle. But we've also been helping museums and aviation organizations like this, giving talks like this to give to their membership, and also to get the word out about our film.
Yes, we've partnered with the French-American Chamber of Commerce, with the Air Force Association, and we've given this presentation to a number of museums around the country. So we are right at the finish line. The football analogy is that it's first and goal on the 9-yard line, and we've come 91 yards on this drive, and we're almost finished. And so this is the ask. We need your help. We went back to FedEx because we need about $175,000 to finish the film. I'm sorry, not to finish the film, but to get the film released. The film is complete. It is done. But to get it released, there's legal and insurance. There's a French language narration version that we want to do. There's supplemental films for the DVD. There's promotion. You know, there's a variety of things that are necessary in order to have the film eligible for release. And FedEx has come through again and has offered us half the amount we asked for, $87,500. We're trying to raise that other half. So we're so close to the finish line, we can see it. And then if we're successful in this, then this film gets out there. And it's the first ever comprehensive documentary film of any kind, really, made about the Lafayette Escadrille, that tells the story in their own words, that tells the story of the young Americans standing up in a time of international crisis, and of the incredible and enduring relationship between France and the United States, which is kind of, you know, those kind of relationships are going to be so important moving forward. So we'd ask you to consider contributing to the film. I know some of you in the audience, certainly Lizette and her family have been incredibly generous to us and gotten us through production and gotten this film finished. Elizabeth, the Leatherman, the Firestone Foundation, also very generous. So we really appreciate everything. The Redwood Library, just have these opportunities to speak to you. We've had so much help along the way. So if there's any of you who would be interested in contributing to this film, please contact us. We're at the LafayetteEscadrille.org, and we'd be happy to talk to you. That is it. Thank you so much. Thank you all very, very much for your kind attention.
I do want to add, Paul, that we have a 20-minute version of the film that was commissioned by the United States World War I Centennial Commission for distribution in American high schools. And the Redwood Library is going to send you all an email with a link to that. You can see it on YouTube. The final film is 2 hours long, but this 20-minute version will give you a good taste of what the story is and what it means.
Thank you all so much. I hope there's some questions. We would be happy to take any questions you have. I hope we can have a conversation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Do we have any questions?
You can put them in the chat box down on the bottom, and we're always happy to talk about it.
Nothing but compliments, no questions thus far.
Compliments are good. We're okay with that.
You know, Paul, I was thinking the Terra Foundation and Smithsonian. You know, the Terra Foundation, very important in Franco-American relations, cultural relations. Seems to me this would be very much in their purview.
Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Actually, I'm just looking at the participants here because I've been sharing my screen the whole time. I haven't seen everybody who's here. And I happen to see that General McPeak, you might be with us. If you'd like to add anything, you were certainly a wonderful participant in the film. Your interview was crucial to us. So if there's anything you'd like to add, we'd be delighted to hear from you.
We sure would.
Is there a connection today in between the American and French Air Force in any kind of significant way that would kind of continue this tradition?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Very much so.
When over the course of working on this project, which included a magazine article that Dan and I did in the exhibit and then the film, we interviewed 2 former chiefs of staff of the Air Force, both of whom said just straight out, you know, including General McPeak, that the French Air Force and that relationship is very important. And certainly the French Air Force generals we met echoed the same thing, that their relationship, their ongoing active military relationship with their American counterparts is incredibly important. The Escadrille Lafayette, and there's also the Groupe de Chasse Lafayette 2/4 still exists, the French Air Force, that's ongoing. And the Legacy Squadron in the U.S. Air Force is the 94th, for which a lot of the Lafayette Escadrille pilots flew at the back end of the war. So yes, that is absolutely an enduring and very important relationship that exists right now.
I'd also like to point out, if I can, Benedict, General McPeak's work in getting the Lafayette Escadrille Memorial refurbished. It was really in horrible shape, and beneath the memorial, there's a crypt. There are 68 sarcophagi, I think, and 51 of them have remains of pilots that flew in World War I. And Merle McPeak was very instrumental in raising all the money to refurbish it and then getting it transferred over to the American Battle Monuments Commission, which takes such pristine care of all the cemeteries of the Americans who have died overseas.
It's a remarkable restoration. The first time I visited the memorial was in the year 2000 to shoot some photographs for a different project. And the difference between what we saw in 2016 and 2000, it's like it's been completely rebuilt. It's brand new. It's a remarkable transformation, and deservedly so.
You can see some of Dan's photographs in the film before and after.
Yep.
I'm seeing here Renee Ketchum, who is part of one of the audience members, has just written, "Are you working with the cultural services of the French Embassy? I'm the president of Focus on French Cinema and Federation of Alliance Française in the USA, and would be interested in promoting the film." Renee Amory Ketchum. Renee, do you want to speak for yourself? I'm just rereading your statement.
Hi, no, I was very interested in this. We spent some time in Newport, and I'm a member of the Redwood Library. But in this new world that we're dealing with, you know, we're doing a lot of virtual presentations to the Alliance Française network in the United States. And maybe the 20-minute version might be a start, but it also might be a way to potentially raise a little bit of money. That's not sort of the purpose of our organization, but it would be a great way to share this film, this idea, with not only the network, but also with Focus on French Cinema, which is a film festival, a francophone film festival that I founded in 2005. We've had everyone from Claude Lelouch to Nathalie Baye, and this is a very sort of a universal film of interest that might be also of interest to our students, our high school students, and have an educational role in the festival. So I'd like to know more, and I've just sent you all an email.
Oh, wonderful. Yes, we would
Wonderful.
we would definitely like to speak to you, and we absolutely are speaking to the cultural services folks at the French Embassy. We're working closely with the French American Chamber of Commerce, who are housed there, and through them we've been introduced to Marie-Hélène Zavara, and it's through her that we are talking about having the DC premiere at the French Embassy. So yes, that relationship has begun, and we would certainly like to develop it.
No, so you're talking to Gaetan, you're talking to the actual cultural services as well as the French American Chamber of Commerce. You got two very different. The cultural services really deals more has more of a film element to it. But anyway, we can talk about that apart from this conversation.
Yeah.
But Renee, can you introduce me to Natalie Bai? Just kidding.
I could if we could go to Paris, we could have cocktails.
There you go. That works.
Often when we do these presentations, we send out a link to the 20-minute film first, and we'd be happy to do that with Alliance Française, and then give our presentation if you'd like.
No, I think the thing to do is, to send the link to me, because I'd heard that at the end, and then I can share that with, I have a board meeting tomorrow at 11.
Wow.
Federation of Alliance Française chapters in the United States, and it would be great if I could forward a link that people might take a look at, because again, with everything going virtual, this might be a great opportunity to get the word out.
Absolutely.
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a new question from Andy Long. What happened to the squadron when America entered the war?
A very interesting story. The squadron was sort of waiting around for several months to see what was going to happen as the Americans got organized. And it was very tough for the Americans to get organized. They had never done anything like that. But all of a sudden, these American officers showed up and demanded that all the members take a physical to be brought into the United States Army Air Service. And all of them failed it. There were I don't know, maybe there were almost 20, 25 pilots at the time, and every single one failed. They were close to the age of 30. They had really been beat up over 3 years of the war, and it took general purging to give them all a pardon and move them in. Raoul Lufberry was moved to a desk job to write a manual on how to be an aviation pilot. And when they figured out that he couldn't really write English very well and that they really needed him to instruct pilots, he was finally brought in as the flight commander for the 94th Aero Squadron. It was a very bumpy transition.
Yeah,
Very bumpy. One of the problems was that all of the brand new, never green pilots coming from the United States were already officers. And none of the Lafayette Escadrille pilots, except William Thaw and Raoul Lufberry, were officers. So these guys were all junior in rank to pilots who had never seen any combat at all. So it was confusing. They were improvising this thing. They were making it up as they went along. And so, as Derek said, it was a very bumpy road. But the squadron N-124 stayed in the French Air Service, but it became something else. And the pilots who were in the Lafayette Escadrille became the 103rd Pursuit Squadron, and William Thaw became their commander. And then other members of the Lafayette Escadrille were assigned to other American squadrons, and they splintered up. Some became instructors, some were sent back to the United States. So the Lafayette Escadrille as a squadron of the original guys ended in 1918, in early 1918.
There was one pilot who did not join the American Air Service. He felt like he had not done enough for France, and he transferred to a French squadron. Yep. And ended the war as an ace with 8 victories, and retired after World War II as a rear admiral in the Navy. Ted Parsons.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Paul and Derek and Dan Patterson, Guillaume, of course, and Lizette, and thank you all. I hope you will be able to join us again next Wednesday for the 3rd installment of Palaces of Repose by John Church. He'll be talking about the villas of Potsdam. And I would invite everyone who is watching to join us then, and also to join the Redwood as members. So thank you, everyone, and see you very soon next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you very much.
A real
It was wonderful
pleasure.
experience.
Thank you, Diana. See you, Guillaume.
Thanks, Kim. Thanks, Diana. Thanks,
See you guys. Talk
Good
to you
night.
tomorrow. Bye.
Good night.